200 people stood frozen in the ballroom of the prestigious Oakwood Country Club. There was a three-tiered cake, there were gold balloons, and standing on opposite sides of the future father banner were two men who had never met. Mark, holding a box of diapers, and Jason, holding the exact same box. They both looked at the woman in the middle. They both looked at the screen behind her, and when the projector clicked on, nobody cheered. The grandmother covered her mouth. The best friend dropped her phone, because what appeared on that screen wasn't a baby scan. It was a spreadsheet. This wasn't just a gender reveal gone wrong. This was the exact second a 2-year empire of lies crumbled into dust. The woman standing there, Sarah, had spent 24 months playing the most dangerous game in human relationships. She told Mark he was the father to secure the house. She told Jason he was the father to secure the cash. She thought she was the smartest person in the room. She thought she could keep them separated until the due date. But Sarah forgot that lies have a shelf life, and she certainly didn't expect both men to hire the same private investigator on the exact same day. Before we get to the screaming, the lawsuits, and the moment the police escorted her off the stage in front of her entire family, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to show you how she built this trap, and we have to show you the moment Mark leaned into the microphone, looked her dead in the eyes, and delivered the 8 words that broke the internet. You bet on 2 fathers and lost everything. To understand the magnitude of the explosion at the country club, you have to understand the architecture of the lie. Sarah didn't just stumble into this situation. She didn't accidentally get pregnant and panic. This was engineered. Mark was the safe bet. He was 32, a landscape architect with a steady income, a paid-off townhouse, and a desperate need to settle down. He was the type of man who opened doors, paid for dinner, and called his mother every Sunday. When he met Sarah at a downtown bookstore, he thought he had found a unicorn. She was soft-spoken, modest, and claimed to work as a high-end freelance interior designer. This was the first pillar of her scheme, the job description. Freelance meant flexible hours. It meant she could disappear for days at a time to meet clients or source materials in the next city over. Mark fell hard. Within 3 months, he gave her a key to his place. Within 4 months, they were talking about marriage. He saw a future. She saw a safety net. But Mark wasn't enough for the lifestyle Sarah believed she deserved. While Mark provided stability, he didn't provide luxury. That's where Jason came in. Jason was 45, a tech investor with a portfolio worth millions and an ego to match. He didn't want a wife, he wanted a trophy. Sarah met him at a charity gala she had crashed. With Jason, she was a different person entirely. She wasn't the modest designer, she was an aspiring art curator, sophisticated and high maintenance. For 6 months, she lived 2 completely separate lives. Monday through Thursday, she was with Mark, cooking dinner and watching movies. Thursday through Sunday, she was with Jason, dining at Michelin-star restaurants and spending weekends on his boat. She told Mark she was on site visits. She told Jason she was visiting her sick aunt in the suburbs. Both men bought it. Neither had a reason to doubt her. Then came the pivot point, the moment the trap snapped shut. It was a Tuesday evening in November. Sarah cooked Mark's favorite meal, lasagna. The mood was heavy, serious. Mark thought she was breaking up with him. Instead, she handed him a small velvet box. Mark's hand shook as he opened it. Inside wasn't a watch or cufflinks. It was a positive pregnancy test resting on a bed of white cotton. She cried. She told him she was scared, that she didn't know if he was ready. Mark didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees, hugging her waist, weeping with pure, unfiltered joy. He promised to take care of everything. He promised to buy a bigger house with a yard. He promised to be the father he never had. He called his mom 5 minutes later, sobbing into the phone. The family group chat lit up.
Mark was finally settling down. He was locked in. But the performance wasn't over. 3 days later, Sarah sat in the passenger seat of Jason's Porsche. She played the scene differently this time. No velvet box, no tears of fear. She played it cool, aloof. She showed him the test and told him she could handle it alone if he wasn't interested. It was a masterclass in reverse psychology. Jason, terrified of losing his legacy, immediately stepped up. He didn't drop to his knees, he opened his wallet. He transferred $10,000 to her account that night for medical expenses and began browsing listings for luxury condos. By the end of the week, she had secured 2 commitments. Mark was renovating a nursery in his mind, ready to be the doting dad. Jason was cutting checks, ready to be the provider. 2 men, 2 fathers, 1 baby. The celebrations were immediate. Mark's family threw an intimate dinner. They toasted to the future. They hugged Sarah, welcoming her into the fold. They knitted blankets. They bought onesies. Mark's mother looked Sarah in the eye and thanked her for making her son so happy. Sarah smiled back, touched her stomach, and didn't blink. At the same time, Jason was bragging to his golf buddies. He was showing off the ultrasound picture Sarah had sent him, a stock image she found online, slightly cropped to hide the watermark. It was the perfect crime. She had doubled her resources. She had 2 men competing to make her comfortable. She felt invincible. She thought she could keep the timelines parallel forever. But she made one critical mistake. She underestimated how much a man wants to be involved when he thinks he has created a legacy, and she certainly didn't account for the fact that Mark and Jason shared a mutual connection, a connection that wouldn't be revealed until it was far too late to run. The clock started ticking the moment she told the second lie, and as the months progressed, the cracks in her dual reality didn't just appear, they began to widen.
A lie of this magnitude is a living thing. It needs to be fed, nurtured, and protected constantly. For the first 3 months, Sarah managed the logistics like a traffic controller. But by the second trimester, the stress began to bleed through. The cracks didn't appear with a bang. They started as whispers. Tiny inconsistencies that a man in love ignores, but a man with intuition files away. The first major red flag was the ultrasound. Mark had cleared his entire schedule. He bought a dad t-shirt. He was ready to see the heartbeat. The morning of the 12-week scan, Sarah told him he couldn't come. She spun a story about new hospital protocols, a lingering restriction from the last flu season that limited guests in the scanning room. Mark was crushed. He offered to wait in the car just to drive her. She refused. She said she needed to focus, that his anxiety was making her anxious. Mark stayed home. He sat on the couch, staring at the wall, feeling a strange coldness in his gut. He tried to shake it off. He told himself he was being selfish. But then he saw the photo she sent later. It was a blurry printout. The date on the top corner was cropped out. When he asked for the original to frame it, she said the nurse forgot to give it to her. Mark let it go, but he didn't forget. Meanwhile, Jason was applying pressure from the other side. He didn't ask to come to the appointment. He demanded to hire a private concierge doctor. He wanted the best. He wanted 4D scans in his living room. Sarah had to think fast. She told him she was high risk and that her specific specialist was the only one who could handle the case. She played the victim card, accusing him of trying to control her body. Jason backed off, but his suspicion was piqued. He was a man who managed risk for a living, and this investment was starting to lack transparency. Then came the phone. Sarah used to leave her phone on the coffee table. Now it was glued to her hand. She took it to the bathroom. She slept with it under her pillow. One Tuesday night, while she was showering at Mark's place, the phone buzzed on the sink. Mark walked in to brush his teeth. The screen lit up. Jay, the nursery designer, needs the dimensions by Friday. Can I come measure? Mark stared at the screen. He didn't know a Jay.
Sarah had told him she was designing the nursery herself. It was her job, after all. When she stepped out of the shower and saw him looking at the phone, she didn't panic. She attacked. She accused him of invading her privacy, of spying. She claimed Jay was a difficult client who didn't understand boundaries. She created a fight out of thin air to distract him from the evidence. Mark apologized, but the seed was planted. Why would a client be asking about her nursery? The inconsistencies began to pile up like unwashed laundry. She told Mark she was craving spicy food and sent him out for tacos. 2 days later, Jason mentioned he took her for Italian because she said spicy food made her sick. She told Jason she was visiting her mother for the weekend. Mark called her mother to wish her a happy birthday, only to learn Sarah hadn't visited in 2 months. But the fatal error, the one that truly started the clock on her destruction, was financial. Sarah got greedy. She asked Mark for $2,000 for a specialized prenatal vitamin plan. Mark transferred it immediately. 3 hours later, she sent a nearly identical text to Jason asking for $3,000 for the same thing, claiming insurance wouldn't cover it. Jason didn't just transfer the money. Jason asked for the invoice for his tax records. Sarah stalled. She sent a fake invoice created in Photoshop. It looked legitimate to the untrained eye, but Jason wasn't untrained. He noticed the font on the total was 2 points larger than the font on the itemized list. He noticed the tax calculation was off by 40 cents. He didn't confront her. That's what an amateur does. Instead, Jason did what he did best. He audited the relationship. He took the invoice number and called the medical supply company listed on the header. The receptionist on the other end typed in the number. There was a long pause. She told Jason that invoice number didn't exist. In fact, they hadn't sold that specific vitamin package in 4 years. Jason hung up the phone. He didn't scream. He didn't call Sarah. He sat in his leather office chair, spun a pen between his fingers, and stared out the window. He realized he wasn't looking at a girlfriend anymore. He was looking at a liability. He needed to know who else was investing in this fraud. He needed eyes on her when she wasn't with him. That afternoon, Jason hired the private investigator. And unbeknownst to him, Mark was sitting at his kitchen table looking at his bank statement and wondering why Sarah's client meetings always happened on the weekends he wasn't allowed to see her. Mark opened Google and typed 3 words: signs of cheating.
Greed is what kills a con. If Sarah had been content with the monthly allowances, she might have kept the charade going until the fake due date. But scammers always get addicted to the adrenaline of the ask. The baby shower was supposed to be the grand finale of her cash grab. She didn't want gifts, she wanted liquidity. She told Mark that her family had a tradition of a cash tree instead of boxed gifts because they wanted to start a college fund early. Mark, wanting to impress her family, withdrew $5,000 in cash. He bought a specialized envelope. He wrote a heartfelt letter. She told Jason a different story. She told him she was hosting a high society gala for the baby, a networking event where he could flaunt his paternity. She needed $20,000 to secure the venue, the Oakwood Country Club. Jason wrote the check without blinking, but he handed it to her with a strange look in his eyes. A look she mistook for admiration. It wasn't. It was the look of a man watching a mouse take the cheese from a trap that's already sprung. Because 24 hours earlier, Jason had received a manila envelope on his desk. Inside were 12 high-definition photographs taken by the private investigator. They didn't show Sarah shopping for cribs. They didn't show her at a doctor's appointment. They showed Sarah in a parking lot behind a dive bar on the south side of the city. In photo number 3, she was leaning against a rusted truck. In photo number 4, she was lighting a cigarette. And in photo number 5, the one that made Jason's blood turn to ice, she was lifting her shirt. There was no baby bump. Her stomach was flat. She was adjusting a strap. She was taking off the prosthetic belly she wore around Mark and Jason, stuffing it into a duffel bag like a piece of gym equipment.
But the photos revealed something else. Someone else. A man came out of the bar. He wasn't Mark, he wasn't Jason. He was a guy in a leather jacket with a neck tattoo. The PI identified him as Ricky, Sarah's actual boyfriend of 4 years, the man she was actually living with, the man she was funding with Jason's investment portfolio and Mark's savings. Jason stared at the photos. He saw Sarah handing Ricky a stack of cash, Mark's cash. He saw them laughing. He saw Ricky kiss her, his hand resting on her flat stomach. Jason didn't explode. He didn't call the police. Not yet. He picked up the phone and dialed the number the PI had included in the report, the number of the other target. Mark was at work when his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but he answered. The voice on the other end was calm, cold, and terrifyingly precise. "You don't know me, but we're paying for the same apartment and we're expecting the same child. I have photos you need to see." Mark thought it was a prank. Then Jason described the mole on Sarah's shoulder. He described the way she took her coffee. He described the specific brand of prenatal vitamins they had both paid for. Mark listened, his world tilting on its axis. He ran to his car. He met Jason in a parking garage 40 minutes later. It was a meeting of two ghosts. Mark looked shattered, his eyes red, holding on to the steering wheel like a lifeline. Jason looked like a hitman, dressed in a tailored suit, holding the file of photos. They sat in Jason's car. Mark looked at the pictures of the flat stomach. He looked at the pictures of Ricky. He vomited dry air. He cried. He felt the humiliation burning his skin. He wanted to confront her immediately. He wanted to scream. Jason grabbed his shoulder. "No," he said. "If you scream now, she leaves. She disappears. She takes the money and runs to the next town. We don't want an apology. We want a funeral for her reputation." Jason laid out the plan. Sarah had scheduled the baby shower at the Oakwood Country Club for that Saturday. She had invited her entire family, her friends, and mostly Ricky's friends who thought she was a genius. She had told Mark that it was a family-only event and he wasn't allowed to come until the end. She had told Jason the venue fell through and the party was canceled. She thought she had successfully segmented her victims. She thought she was going to walk into that ballroom, collect $40,000 in cash gifts, and vanish with Ricky the next morning. Mark wiped his face. The sadness evaporated, replaced with a cold, hard hatred. "What do we do?" he said. Jason pulled out a laptop. "We give her exactly what she wants, a big audience. I own a membership at Oakwood. I didn't cancel the booking. I upgraded it. I added a projector screen, and I invited everyone." They spent the next 48 hours compiling the dossier. Mark provided the text messages. Jason provided the financial records. The PI provided the surveillance footage of the fake belly coming off. They built a presentation. The lie had exploded in private. Now, it was time for the chaperonelle to hit the public.
Saturday, 2 p.m. The Oakwood Country Club ballroom was a sea of pastel pinks and blues. Sarah had outdone herself. There were 200 guests. Her mother was crying happy tears in the corner. Her friends were lining up to drop envelopes thick with cash into a wishing well decorated with silk ribbons. Ricky was there too. Sarah had introduced him as her cousin who was helping with security. He was standing by the wishing well, keeping a close eye on the money. Sarah stood in the center of the room, wearing a flowing white maternity dress, her hand resting protectively on the silicone curve of her stomach. She looked radiant. She looked like a saint. She was telling her aunt about the difficult labor the doctors were predicting. She was playing the role of the martyr perfectly. She checked her watch. In 1 hour, she would claim a migraine, load the gifts into Ricky's van, and they would be gone. She calculated the take in her head, $40,000, maybe $50,000, enough to start over in a new state. The silence wasn't gradual. It was instant. 200 heads turned toward the entrance. Mark walked in first. He wasn't wearing the dad t-shirt. He was wearing a black suit. He looked like an executioner. Jason walked in a step behind him, holding a remote control. He looked like the owner of the building, because he was. Sarah dropped her glass. It shattered on the parquet floor, champagne soaking the hem of her dress. Her face went from radiant to gray in a heartbeat. She took a step back, bumping into the cake table. She tried to signal Ricky, but Ricky was already freezing up, sensing the atmospheric pressure. "Excuse me." Sarah's mother stepped forward, confused. "This is a private event." Mark didn't look at her mother. He walked straight to the stage, stepped up to the microphone, and tapped it twice. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's been a mistake with the programming. You see, Sarah told you all that the father couldn't be here today. She was half right, because neither of the fathers were invited." Sarah lunged forward. "Mark, don't! Get out! Security!" "Sit down, Sarah," Jason said from the floor. His voice boomed without a microphone. He pointed the remote control at the massive projection screen behind her. "Or I play the audio recording from the police interrogation room regarding your boyfriend Ricky's warrant." Ricky froze. Sarah froze. The room held its breath. Slide 1. The math. A split screen appeared. On the left, a text to Mark. "Baby needs a specialized crib. $1,200, please. Timestamp, 9:02 a.m. On the right, a text to Jason. "Insurance denied the crib. Need $1,500 ASAP. Timestamp, 9:04 a.m. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Sarah's mother looked at the screen, then at Sarah. "What is this?" Slide 2. The ultrasounds. 2 images appeared side by side. Both were ultrasound scans. Both had the exact same serial number, but one was labeled Baby Smith Mark, and the other was Baby Smith Jason. Underneath, in bright red text, was a screenshot from a Google image search. "Generic 20-week ultrasound stock photo." "She sold us the same baby," Mark said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "She took $20,000 from me. She took $30,000 from him. And she told you all that she was doing it alone." Sarah was shaking now. "It's a lie! They're hacking the screen! Mom, don't look!" Slide 3. The smoking gun. This was the kill shot. A high-resolution video played. It was grainy, shot from a distance, but unmistakable. It showed Sarah standing behind the dive bar. The audience watched in horror as the woman in the white maternity dress on the screen reached under her shirt, unbuckled a strap, and pulled the stomach off. She held the prosthetic in one hand and a cigarette in the other. Ricky walked into the frame and kissed her. The ballroom erupted. It wasn't just a gasp this time, it was a roar. Sarah's aunt screamed. Her best friend covered her mouth and backed away. Sarah's mother collapsed into a chair, clutching her chest. Mark turned to look at Sarah. She wasn't the saint anymore. She was a cornered animal. She looked at the crowd, searching for a friendly face, but all she found was disgust. The guests she had scammed, the family she had lied to, they were all looking at her stomach, the stomach that was currently strapped to her body. "Take it off," a voice yelled from the back. It was her own brother. "No!" Sarah screamed, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time, tears of terror. "You don't understand. I needed the money. I did it for us." She pointed at Ricky. Ricky, realizing the ship was sinking, did what cowards do. He turned and ran toward the fire exit. But Jason had anticipated that. 2 uniformed officers stepped out from the kitchen service doors, blocking his path. The illusion was gone. The cash tree was just a bucket of stolen money. The pregnant mother was just a con artist in a costume. And the 2 men she had played against each other were standing side by side, watching her world burn down in 4K resolution. But Mark wasn't done. He had one more slide. The screaming stopped the moment the police officers walked onto the stage.
They didn't come in with guns drawn or sirens wailing. They walked in with clipboards. Jason had prepared a comprehensive file for them, too. He handed the lead officer a folder containing the fake invoices, the bank transfer records, and the affidavit from the medical supply company confirming the forgery. This wasn't a domestic dispute anymore. It was felony theft by deception and wire fraud. Sarah tried to pivot. She wiped the tears instantly, her face hardening into a mask of indignation. She tried to tell the officers that it was a misunderstanding, a civil matter between lovers. She tried to play the victim one last time. But the officer didn't look at her face. He looked at the screen behind her, where the video of her removing the fake belly was still looped on a freeze frame. He asked her to turn around and place her hands behind her back. The handcuffing wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence of her family. As she was led off the stage, she looked at her mother. Her mother was sitting on a folding chair, staring at the floor, clutching a napkin. She didn't look up. She didn't reach out. She didn't ask the officers where they were taking her daughter. She simply ceased to acknowledge Sarah's existence. The bridge hadn't just been burned. It had been vaporized. They didn't arrest her immediately for the long term. They booked her, processed her, and released her pending the full investigation. This was part of Jason's plan. He knew if she went straight to jail, she would be fed and housed. He wanted her out in the world. He wanted her to experience the absolute freezing of her life. Sarah walked out of the precinct at 2 a.m. Her phone had been seized as evidence. She hailed a cab, planning to go to the apartment she shared with Ricky. She reached into her purse to pull out her debit card. She swiped it, declined. She tried her credit card, declined. She tried the backup card she kept hidden in the lining of her wallet, declined. Jason hadn't just reported the fraud to the police. His legal team had filed emergency injunctions with every major financial institution she banked with, flagging the accounts as containing proceeds of crime. Her assets were frozen solid. She was standing on a street corner in the middle of the night with a designer purse that contained absolutely nothing of value. She had to walk 5 miles back to the apartment. When she got there, her key didn't work. The lock had been changed. Taped to the door wasn't an eviction notice, but a printout of the ultrasound slide from the presentation. Beneath it was a note from the landlord. Mark had emailed him the police report and the photos of the damage Ricky had caused to the property. The landlord had exercised an emergency clause in the lease for illegal activity. Her clothes were in trash bags on the sidewalk. It was a systematic dismantling of her identity. Over the next 48 hours, the silent revenge took hold. Mark took on the digital front. He didn't post a rant on social media. He simply updated his status to single and posted one image, the letter from the PI confirming the fraud. He tagged the local freelance group Sarah used to find clients. He tagged the interior design board she frequented. Her reputation as a high-end designer evaporated overnight. Clients she had scammed in small ways in the past saw the post and realized they had been victims too. The comments section became a compilation of evidence. People were posting screenshots of her lies, her excuses, her fake invoices. Her digital footprint she had carefully curated to look successful became a permanent record of her criminality. She had no money. She had no home. She had no phone. She had no allies. Ricky was in custody on unrelated warrants that Jason's PI had dug up. Her family had blocked her number on their landlines. She spent the next 3 days sleeping in the lobby of a 24-hour hospital, the only place warm enough that wouldn't kick her out immediately. She had spent 2 years building a complex web of noise and distraction to keep Mark and Jason confused. Now she had total clarity. She was alone in a city that knew exactly who she was, and the court date was coming. Jason had hired a shark of a prosecutor to assist the district attorney. They weren't going to offer a plea deal. They were going to make an example out of her. The silent phase was over. The legal hammer was about to fall.
The courtroom was cold, sterile, and completely devoid of the sympathy Sarah had relied on her entire life. 6 months had passed since the baby shower. In that time, Sarah had aged 5 years. She sat at the defense table wearing an oversized orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. There was no makeup to contour her face, no filtered lighting to soften her angles. She looked raw, exhausted, and small. Mark and Jason sat in the front row of the gallery. They weren't sitting together as friends, but as witnesses to a necessary end. They didn't look at each other. They kept their eyes fixed on the back of Sarah's head. Her public defender tried to paint a picture of a confused, desperate woman who had made a series of emotional mistakes. He argued that she was a victim of societal pressure, that she wanted a family so bad she lost touch with reality. It was a good story, but stories don't stand up against spreadsheets. The prosecutor, armed with the evidence Jason's team had compiled, didn't use adjectives. She used numbers. She walked the jury through the timeline. She showed the text messages asking for money for the cribs, sent 3 minutes apart. She showed the bank transfers totaling over $52,000. She showed the search history on Sarah's seized laptop, which included queries like non-extradition countries and how to bleach hair at home. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a business model. When it was time for Sarah to speak, she stood up. She tried to summon the tears that had worked on Mark for 2 years. She trembled. She looked at the judge and apologized, claiming she never meant to hurt anyone. She said she fell in love with 2 men and didn't know how to choose. The judge, a stern woman who had seen every con in the book, peered over her glasses. She picked up the file containing the photos of Sarah smoking behind the dive bar while wearing the prosthetic belly. She looked at Sarah and delivered the line that crushed the defense. "You didn't fall in love with 2 men. You fell in love with 2 bank accounts. You defrauded these men not out of confusion, but out of calculation. You played on their desire to be fathers to fund a lifestyle you didn't earn. That isn't a mistake. That is predation." The gavel came down hard. The sentence was severe. 4 years in state prison for grand larceny and fraud, followed by 10 years of probation. But the prison time wasn't the part that ruined her. It was the restitution order. The judge ordered Sarah to pay back every single cent she had taken, plus legal fees, plus emotional damages. She was leaving that courtroom with a debt of nearly $150,000. She would be garnishing her wages for the rest of her natural life. As the bailiff handcuffed her and led her away, Sarah looked back at the gallery. She locked eyes with Mark. She expected to see anger. She expected him to gloat. But Mark just looked at her with a blank, indifferent stare. He checked his watch, stood up, and walked out of the courtroom without a backward glance. That indifference hurt more than any scream could have. It was the ultimate signal that she no longer mattered. But the punishment didn't end at the courthouse steps. The internet has a long memory, and it is unforgiving. During the trial, the footage from the baby shower, the reveal moment where Mark and Jason exposed the lie, found its way onto the internet. It didn't just go viral, it became global folklore. The video amassed 15 million views in 3 days. It was dissected by body language experts, reacted to by streamers, and memed into oblivion. Sarah became the face of betrayal. Her mugshot was plastered next to the photo of her fake belly. She became a cautionary tale, a shorthand for relationship fraud. People she had never met were analyzing her psychology on podcasts. Her name was now synonymous with the scam. Even when she eventually got out of prison, a simple Google search of her name would ensure she never worked a reputable job, rented a decent apartment, or dated a trusting man ever again. She had wanted to be the center of attention. She had wanted everyone to look at her. Now millions of people were looking at her, and they were all laughing. Mark and Jason went their separate ways outside the courthouse. They didn't shake hands. They didn't plan a reunion. They shared a trauma, not a friendship. Mark got into his car, the same car he used to drive to buy her cravings, and felt a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The nursery was empty. The bank account was drained, but the lie was gone. He was free.
1 year later, the nursery in Mark's townhouse is gone. He didn't just sell the furniture, he repainted the walls. The soft yellow paint is now a deep, focused navy blue. It's an office now, a space for work, for clarity, for reality. Mark met someone new 3 months ago. On their third date, she asked him why he was so guarded, why he double-checked everything. He didn't tell her the whole story. He simply said he learned the hard way that trust is something that must be verified, not blindly given. He is happier now, but he is different. The innocence is gone, replaced by a sharp, protective wisdom. Jason didn't change his life. He simply updated his operating system. To him, Sarah was a bad venture capital investment. He wrote off the loss, fired the people who let her get close, and tightened his security protocols. He still wants a legacy, but now he knows that a legacy can't be bought. It has to be built with truth. He keeps the dossier on his desk as a reminder that the most dangerous predators don't look like monsters. They look like your dreams coming true. And Sarah? Sarah sits in a 6x8 cell in a state correctional facility. She works in the laundry room for 12 cents an hour. Every month, a portion of that 12 cents is automatically deducted to pay back Mark and Jason. At her current rate of repayment, she will clear her debt in approximately 4,000 years. She writes letters to her mother. They come back, stamped "Return to Sender." She writes letters to Ricky. He never responds. He's moved on to the next scam, the next town, the next victim who hasn't seen the news. She spends her recreational time watching the small TV in the common room. Sometimes she sees commercials for diapers or cribs, and every time she does, the other inmates look at her. They know who she is. In prison, there is a hierarchy, and women who use imaginary children to trap men sit at the very bottom of the food chain. This story isn't just about a fake pregnancy. It's about the devastating cost of entitlement. Sarah believed the world owed her a lifestyle. She believed that Mark's kindness and Jason's wealth were resources she could harvest. She treated human beings like ATMs and emotions like passcodes. She thought she was the smartest person in the room because she could cry on cue. She thought she was a master strategist because she could juggle 2 calendars. But she forgot the fundamental rule of physics that applies to lies. The bigger the structure, the harder it falls. She built a skyscraper on a foundation of quicksand. She invited everyone she knew to watch her climb to the top, and then she forced them to watch her fall. Mark and Jason never speak, but they share a silent victory. They reclaimed their lives. They reclaimed their dignity. They refused to be victims. They stood up in front of a crowded room and turned the lights on. And when you turn the lights on, the cockroaches have nowhere to hide. Sarah wanted to be a mother. She wanted the attention, the gifts, the adoration. She wanted to be the center of 2 men's worlds. She accomplished her goal. She is the center of their worlds. She is the lesson they will never forget. She is the cautionary tale they will tell their real children one day. She gambled her freedom for a crib she didn't need and a baby she didn't have. She tried to play God with biology and bankers with love. She told 2 men they were the father, but in the end, the only thing she gave birth to was her own destruction.